Today I have a special guest with background in intelligence, understanding what's going on in Washington, D.C. to help me go through this week's confirmations, President Trump, the Russia-Ukraine. Rebekah Koffler, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here with you and your audience, Stephen.
Well, thank you. Just some background. Rebekah is a military intelligence officer. She's also the host of Censored But Not Silenced, and I'll leave links to that down below. Tulsi Gabbard, she's loved by many, hated by others. I'm personally a fan of hers. I'm reading her confirmation could be a difficult one. Why do you think she would or would not be good as the Director of National Intelligence?
Well, Tulsi is actually a perfect fit for this position, Stephen. That is my assessment. How do I know this? It's because I worked closely with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence when I served as an intelligence officer at the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. DIA is a military counterpart to the CIA. And I was detailed to the National Intelligence Council that sits within the DNI structure. So Tulsi, if confirmed, would be the head of the entire intelligence bureaucracy that currently consists of 18 different agencies. That position is extremely important, and she fits perfectly for three reasons for this position. And first and foremost, it's because she's a former Democrat, and people might wonder why. And that is because intelligence is supposed to be non-partisan. Why is that? It's because a foreign threat is a foreign threat. It is a threat to all Americans, not just Democrats or Republicans. But what happened in the past few years, and I witnessed it directly, is extreme politicization of intelligence and the purging of honest intelligence officers who disagree with what I call the party line, right? This is where all of the Russia collusion hoax, came from, and the fact that the agencies did not want to admit or to assess that COVID actually did come from a lab leak. It's because they have become basically the KGB, if you will. They were targeting Trump, right? Or they were targeting, I have my own personal story where I was targeted by the deep state for predicting Putin's invasion of Ukraine and actually warning about the actual real Russian threat, which is mostly to Europe. And it's only if the United States does intervene in Russia's perceived sphere of influence, such as Ukraine, that it becomes a threat to us. But nobody wanted to hear. They went after me because I warned about that, and I didn't subscribe to the whole Trump-Russia collusion. So Tulsi would be perfect because she will be working in the Trump administration, which is Republican, but she's a former Democrat. Her priority is America's security first. And we have seen her in action. She has a 22-year service in the military. She understands what the battlefield requirements for intelligence are, because those people who sit in offices, right, and they don't understand much of it. They don't speak like Russian, they don't speak Chinese, they don't speak, let's say Arabic, and yet they analyze situations on the battlefield. Well, Tulsi is going to make sure that we have competent officers, and we have officers who are not afraid to speak truth to power. And in order to be unafraid, you have to be able to risk your career, to lose your career, because the deep state will go after you. And if you disagree with their mantra, whatever that is, whatever the day, mantra of the day is, whether it's a COVID, whatever came from, I don't know, the market or whatever the nonsense that they put out there. And Tulsi is going to correct that situation.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is she's not really inexperienced or a threat to our foreign adversaries, but it's right here in the homeland, they're worried about what she might do to them or dismantle the system that they're used to operating within?
Exactly. This is why the deep state, or I call people who were attacking, a lot of the Democrats, they were basically ambushing not only Tulsi, but Kash Patel, RFK Jr. I call those people American Bolsheviks, because I came from Soviet Russia, right, to America, the land of freedom and justice and opportunity. And I've seen Bolsheviks in action in Russia, and they are here. And those are the Democrats who want to transform America into Soviet Russia, because they've turned us into dictatorship with all the censorship and all the silencing the religious voices, the conservative, going after honest people, right? They perceive people like Tulsi, like Kash and RFK Jr. as a threat, because those three and other on Trump's team, they want to dismantle the deep state. That is Trump's goal, because deep state has made America weaker. It has made it poorer and less secure, because what they want to do is democratize every nook and cranny of the world, right? Including countries that have nothing in their history that points to the fact that democracy is even a viable form of government for them. But they want to do it. They want Ukraine. They want to all these places, because they are, beholden to the military-industrial complex that makes a profit on waging war and sucking the American taxpayer dry, by providing those billions of dollars, for unwinnable wars.
Yes. Okay. I mean, that's what they wanted to go after Julian Assange for, was saying these wars are about profit. They're not about winning. And now you have Pete Hegseth that says we want to be lethal killers, get in, get out, avoid war at all costs. But if we do have to go in, so I love the shakeup that President Trump is bringing back to the United States. You recently wrote over on Fox News that President Trump's foreign policy is putting our friends and our enemies on edge. What do you mean by that? And can you give me some examples?
Let me first address the friends, the so-called friends, right? Our allies. And yes, NATO, most NATO members are our allies, true allies, with the exception probably of Turkey, that tries to sit sort of on both chairs. It's trying to be Putin's friend and NATO's friend. In reality, Turkey's for itself, Erdogan. But there are others that say that they're allies, but they don't put their money where their mouth is. They basically have been taking advantage of us. And I'm talking about countries like Germany, the richest country in Europe, and yet it does not pay even 2% of its GDP towards the collective security kitty, right? And President Trump, during the first administration, for the first time of all, U.S. president, he started insisting on NATO members to pay for their security, because it's unfair to the American taxpayer for us to provide the lion's share for those people. And so, and because Trump has already said, look, you need to provide 5%. And my assessment is that he's going to enforce that, because truly 2% is just not enough. Why is that? And we've seen that in Ukraine, because by providing limitless resources to Ukraine, we have actually depleted our own weapons arsenal to very dangerous levels. Stingers, javelins, 155 millimeter ammunition, and our military-industrial complex does not have the capacity to replenish that arsenal. It's going to take anywhere from 5 to 18 years for us to replenish that, depending on the type of the weapon system. And the Europeans are in the same position, right? And so yes, they need, and that's why they're upset, because they're used to just the Washington establishment just pumping in resources into them, and all they need to do is like sit around and drink their cappuccinos and have 3 months vacations and free healthcare, free this, for that. And let me tell you, I briefed NATO commanders, actually in the run up to Putin's invasion of Crimea in November. I'm sorry, in September 2013, where I actually, again, predicted back then, and nobody wanted to lift a finger because they didn't want to pay for this. They didn't. And because they decided, it's much easier to throw Ukrainian into Putin's meat grinder, right? And that's why Ukraine is being destroyed. 500,000 Ukrainians are dead, and President Trump wants to stop that. So, but the reason why our foes are basically uneasy right now is because President Trump is what we call a real politic type of person, and he uses transactional approach and economic warfare, if you will, instead of putting the American troops on the ground. He doesn't want any Americans killed. We lost 6,000 American lives in Afghanistan and $2.2 trillion. Trump wants to deter wars rather than fight them, which is, as Sun Tzu said, the ancient Chinese military strategist who wrote the seminal treatise, The Art of War. He said the stupidest way of fighting wars is actually fighting them. You right? You need to defeat your adversary before fighting, and to deter these wars. And that's what President Trump did by threatening tariffs. Right. And we saw this example of the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, who within minutes, he reversed his decision to prohibit U.S. military aircraft from bringing his illegal migrants who invaded our country back to Colombia. He just switched his decision quickly. And so Trump is putting on notice the Russians and the Chinese that not only he will slap more sanctions and tariffs, but he also will unleash the full force of American energy dominance. And that has a very significant effect on Putin's ability to finance wars, as well as the Chinese ability to finance its weapons development and those things.
Okay, let me put something up here on the screen for us to look at together. This is over on Twitter. 2 Trump advisors are saying that President Trump has privately said any Republican senator that goes against confirming Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr., he's prepared to go scorched earth. He realizes that they may be in trouble of not getting voted in, not because of Democrats, but because of Republicans. What do you think he means by that? He'll bring public awareness to it. He'll call for them to be recalled. He'll call for them to be primaried. What do you think he might do?
So, well, first I'd like to address the kind of the rationale for this tactic that President Trump uses, because a lot of people just don't understand that. And that is basically, it's his art of making a deal. And before you make a deal, right, or with anybody really, is you try to get a favorable negotiating position. And you do that, and you use that in warfare as well. You try to unbalance your adversary and put the seeds of doubt about what it is that you're going to do if you don't get, what you're trying to get out of them. And I compare this approach actually with the approach that Peter the Great used, the Russian Tsar, the famous Russian Tsar, who tortured his own son in 1718 to death for allegedly conspiring against him. But not that Trump is going to torture anybody. No, I'm just addressing the concept. There's a Russian saying, "Чтоб другим мало не показалось," which basically is translated as to disabuse others from being tempted. So you basically, you put a threat out there, whether it's a tariff or whether what Trump is going to do to telegraph, to disabuse like other people from thinking that they can just go ahead and mess with you. I mean, there's a reason why Trump put together this team, is because the Washington establishment, the deep state, they have really, really eroded America's security and our prosperity for their own gain. I mean, this is very clear, whether it's, whether we're talking military-industrial complex or you're talking about the pharmaceutical industry. And I love it how RFK, during his testimony, when he said basically, he told Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders was accusing RFK from being beholden to pharmaceutical. And he said, no, you, Bernie, actually are the one who's beholden to them because they were contributing. So first, that is Trump intent, is to unbalance these people and to compel them to do his will, which is to approve these excellent, outstanding public servants who are going to serve Americans, not their own, not enrich their own pockets. But the second, he's not going to do, he's just basically going to galvanize, my assessment, his supporters and people like the base of Charlie Kirk, right? TP USA, the Steve Bannon, because those people are, if you watch, what they do, they are advocating for their base, for their listeners and constituents, to call the congressperson or the Senate person and compel them to change their decision, or if not, they actually prepare the next person in line who is more aligned with the conservative, with the true conservative, the populist, agenda and thinking, which is basically make America great again, right? It's America first. It's not someone else's freedom, not Ukrainians, not Syrians or Afghans. It's Americans first. Our healthcare, our security, everything for us first. And then if we have something left over, which America is a very generous country, we can give it to our allies. But instead, what happens now? We give money to Taliban. I mean, how does that make sense? So these people are going to bring common sense back. And that's why President Trump wants to make sure he gets his people.
Yeah. Let me put this up on the screen here. I noticed that Bernie Sanders says to RFK Jr., oh, you're bought and paid for. And then RFK correctly points out, you received more than anyone else, $1.5 million. So now Bernie Sanders has egg all over his face because he's been called out for being a receiver of big pharma money, now trying to block someone who could seriously disrupt big pharma. Let me ask you this. A couple of days ago, I had Dr. Jerome Corsi on my show. He has a podcast called Truth Central. He said from everything he knows about Russia that Vladimir Putin is flashing red lights, that he wants to meet with Donald Trump, that he wants to bring this war to an end. Do you agree with that? Do you see President Trump meeting with Vladimir Putin soon? And can he actually bring this Russia-Ukraine war to an end?
So this one is complicated, Stephen. I wouldn't characterize it as Putin flashing the red light, right? Because that's just not how Putin operates. He is another one who very much understands the art of the deal. And that's why Putin and Trump, they have respect for each other, right? Putin ensured that he's an excellent negotiating position right now, because he transitioned Russian military and economy 7 years prior to the invasion of Ukraine. And he knows that he can outlast the West. He can fight, his forces can fight until the last Ukrainian, and he can fight until we run out of weapons to provide Ukraine, because his military industrial complex is working 24/7 right now in 3 shifts because of what I said. He transitioned it on a wartime footing, and we're not on a wartime footing. Putin does want to end this war. He doesn't want to destroy Ukraine completely. He doesn't want to kill any more Ukrainians or Russians, but he wants to end it on his terms. And his terms are unacceptable to Washington. And that's why the war started in the first place. What are Putin's terms? Putin wants legal guarantees that Ukraine is never going to become part of NATO, because NATO is a adversarial alliance, just like we view Russia as a top threat. They view the United States and NATO as a top threat, and Ukraine is part of Russia's strategic security perimeter, on which it relied for its security for centuries. It's Putin's version of the Monroe Doctrine. So that's one condition. The other condition is that Russia keeps 20% of the territory, plus Crimea, that it has annexed. And the third criteria, and there are a lot more, I'm just giving the top 3 ones, is that the West recognizes the Donbas region that has been annexed as Russian. Washington would never go for it, and even to President Trump, my assessment is that that would be unacceptable. Why is that? It would make us look like idiots, because this is the same position and possibly even worse. Oh, and the removal of sanctions, of course, I forgot to mention. This would be a worse position. 3 years and of destruction. 50% of critical infrastructure of Ukraine is destroyed, and that is the United Nations itself, has revealed that. 500,000 of Ukrainians are dead or gravely wounded, and the United States is $200 billion shorter now in our treasury. And a lot of weapon system, like I said, like what kind of deal is that? So it's gonna end, but Putin wants to play. He's playing a long game, and he's a master manipulator. And I have a whole chapter in my book, Putin's Playbook, that describes, Putin's psychology, how he thinks. Like, he's a judo man, like trained in judo, which basically the philosophy is to use your enemy's force, your opponent's force against him, to unbalance. Now Trump understands it very well, and he's going to use, like I said, energy dominance. Right now, that is a very, very complicated approach, and it's not a certain approach. It could work, but it could also backfire, because the sanctions backfired at us that we put on Russia. The Russian economy, the Russian sanction-proofed his economy also several years prior. He took several measures, including launching the import substitution program. And his economy his military industrial complex is really buzzing along, but we got inflation. You understand? And many people don't know just how well Trump understands Putin. I want to mention this. Putin actually in May appointed an economist as his defense minister. Why is that? Because again, he understands how the United States uses economic warfare, or will use, because they've been studying Trump. The Russians do psychological profiles on U.S. top leaders, including Trump, obviously, and they did that in preparation for his first administration, and they continue doing it on a continuous basis. And so Trump knows how Putin's think. Guess who is Pete's deputy that Trump nominated? He's also an economist, and so this remains to be seen. I am personally not very optimistic. It certainly hasn't happened in 24 hours, as President Trump said, not that I ever take him literally. I know what he means. It's a tactic. But my assessment is that is not even going to happen in 100 days, because people around Trump, even like General Kellogg, whom he appointed as his envoy, they originally come from the establishment line of thinking and their doctrine, which is underpinned by ideology. They're not going to want to give Putin, what he wants, and because we don't want to hand victory to Putin, and we don't want to look like idiots, and we don't have much leverage over Russia because we were unprepared, and that's Washington establishment's fault, that we were unprepared for this war, despite the fact that we knew about it, I would say, for at least a decade. We knew Putin's plans, but somehow there's something, like, I think in Washington, maybe it's American culture, I don't know, maybe you can help me out and comment on this one. There's something in American perception, like when the adversary tells you what they're going to do, Americans think, nah, it's just not going to happen, because it just sounds so crazy. Like Xi Jinping has codified in China's long-term policy that he's going to incorporate Taiwan, and that he's going to make China the top military and economic power, right? And we're just not prepared for that. And that's what Putin said. And that's why the deep seek, right? The deep seek technology that just came out, like the Chinese basically rubbed the Silicon Valley's noses by achieving this capability that is much cheaper and much more potent, if you will. And so, but no, we are unprepared, whether it's September 11th, whether it's, I don't know, Pearl Harbor, Putin's invasion, and now China also. We're just unprepared because we think everything is going to be fine. Perhaps because, unlike Russia, whose history is just full of wars, like there were hundreds of wars in Russia's century-old history, but the United States is a young country, and there has never really been a ferocious war, on U.S. soil, a big one, where Russia lost 25 million people, right? In World War II. So, but maybe you can explain to me why we are never prepared for what the adversary said, that they very clearly and written many times what they were going to do.
Yeah, I mean, just from what I've studied, my observation is a lot of these other countries, they focus on their own country. They make their military big. They reinvest in their own people, their schools, their infrastructure. Meanwhile, America, in order to remain dominant, continues to give money to other nations, and we get involved in other people's wars to the point where now our border is being invaded. We're being taken over. It's just, I think it's been bad leadership, and this pursuit of trying to push democracy on other people. I had someone here that said, listen, for all of George Bush's faults, he really thought he could make the Middle East more like America. Well, it cost us $9 trillion, and we still didn't do it, So I don't know. I just, maybe there's an arrogance of being told that we ended World War II, and then we were given the Brentwood, the dollar, the world reserve currency, and then America got really rich. But, we've never had a really big war on our own soil, and we've just continued to pump the U.S. taxpayer money out of America at a crazy rate. Other countries just don't do that.
Yeah, and speaking about the U.S. dollar, the premier currency of foreign exchange and international transactions has been, for decades. And these, I don't even know what to call them. They're very incompetent so far. Whoever was managing, our economic policy. I mean, those sanctions, basically, they have eroded the world's confidence into U.S. dollar. And now Putin has stood up BRICS, and they are working on establishing a currency alternative to the dollar. And countries who are even U.S. like allies, like India, for example, they joined that bloc because guess what? They don't want to be beholden. Like they don't want to depend on Washington, and who could unleash those economic sanctions, if they don't like what the leaders do in their own country, right? So even Saudi Arabia, for example, right? They have traditional allies, but those are the guys that chopped up the Washington Post journalist, right? Put them in a suitcase, and so they want to be able to do things like that and not depend on the U.S. dollar. So, but President Trump is actually, he uses transactional approach. He doesn't care how Putin, treats the Russians or how Xi Jinping governs China. He cares about how American people, whether American people are safe and secure, and whether we are healthy, and that's how he conducts business. That's his playbook. That's Trump's playbook, is America first. That's why he chose the slogan MAGA, Make America Great Again, that some people don't understand.
Yeah. Okay, you've got a new book coming out, Trump's Playbook, but you've written Putin's Playbook. What is Putin's Playbook?
Yes, so Putin's Playbook, this is the book that I wrote, which at unclassified level describes Putin's strategy and Russia's war-fighting doctrine. That includes 5 major instruments, including cyber and space are just some of them. And the Defense Intelligence Agency actually wanted to kill my book because they didn't want the Americans to know how badly they bungled the Russia threat, because again, they were in tandem with the Obama administration's Russia collusion. They didn't want to focus on the actual Russia threat. They didn't want to deter, to beef up our security and develop our deterrence strategy, and let just Putin do it, because they were busy concocting the hoax targeting Trump. So that's why I did this, because again, nobody listened when I was warning about Russia, and that's what I wrote. I wrote this book describing very clearly, and everything was consistent. Everything that happened since then is described, is forecasted in my book, and all current events that are happening, whether it's in Ukraine or whether when the Russians target our critical infrastructure, which they do routinely with cyber attacks, whether it's the Russians' intentions, and the Chinese, by the way, to disable or destroy our satellites, if we were to put, on which we're dependent, not only for our every aspect of our military operations, but every aspect of our civilian life. Not many people understand that. So if we were to put boots on the ground in Ukraine, and this is why, it will never happen, is because the Russians have us by the cojones, if you will, because nobody was paying attention. They were developing cyber capability, space capability under our noses for 20 years. The very first cyber operation against the U.S. military installations and labs, weapons labs and stuff, dates back to the early 90s, called Moonlight Maze. And we never bothered to secure our systems from cyber attacks. Same with the satellites, right? It's the very same thing. And so that's what I described, to put on notice, to let the American people just how vulnerable we are. And we see these vulnerabilities, like look at our airspace. The Chinese flew the spy balloon. Why did they fly that spy balloon that basically collected intelligence on many military installations? Because they're demonstrating to us a new generation type of war, like it's called swarming. Because the U.S. way of war is unsustainable, and actually, the Pentagon knows that. I briefed just this past summer. I briefed the Space Forces, even though I am officially not part of U.S. government anymore. But there's an actual shortage of expertise, even with the U.S. government, inside the intelligence community in Russia, just like I described, because they have people who are incompetent. That's why we're going into these wars, spend 20 years, and then we run away. Anyway, I briefed Space Forces, and I, basically demonstrate U.S. way of war is unsustainable. Why? Because we use multi-million-dollar assets to strike $1,000 targets. Our missiles, we will run out of missiles before the Chinese will run out of balloons and or whatever, or drones. Like drones are very cheap. This is why a lot of the adversaries, even like Iranians, they use US drones, the stolen drone technology, to reverse engineer and to build their own drones. The Shaheeds are very, very robust, type of military hardware. And so the Chinese were demonstrating to us, and to shoot them down. Remember, eventually Biden decided to shoot them down. What did he use to shoot them down? A multi-million-dollar asset. So, but then Chinese were sitting there and laughing and saying, "You're gonna run out of your missiles," and we already like I said, running out of certain missiles. So I wanted, with my book, I wanted to tell the American people, this is the situation, because the people who were charged with our security, they didn't concern themselves with our security. They concerned themselves with how to democratize Afghanistan and Syria and Libya, and meanwhile destabilize the West and made America poor, to, like you said, 9 trillion, here in the Middle East, 2 trillion in Ukraine, these people. So that's why they need to go. And Trump understands that, though. That's why he wants everyone. He offered these buyouts to these government bureaucrats. And I worked with them. A lot of them are incompetent. There are many, many dedicated, competent people, yes, with some of these agencies, but there's so much incompetence because those people would not find a job in the private sector because they can't think independently. They can't innovate. They just basically apparatchiks, like Soviet-style apparatchiks. They sit there to collect a paycheck and get their health insurance, which is, by the way, the best, in the country. And regular Americans are, working hard to feed that machine, right? The Pentagon is a machine. That's why I'm hoping that I know he's gonna try to transform it, but they're gonna fight hard, Stephen. They already put out the resistance, because these people, because the whole livelihood is now threatened, because with this, because if we end this war, the military industrial complex is not gonna continue producing the revenue, so they can't hire all those revolving door apparatchiks that normally come in from the government, and they go on the board, let's say Lloyd Austin, Biden's SecDef. Pete Hegseth is not in bed with any of these military industrial complex machines companies. So yeah, that's the situation. That's why they are fighting so hard against Tulsi and Kash and RFK Jr.
Yeah. Did you see the most recent movie about Ronald Reagan around Christmas time?
I haven't yet. It's on my to-do list. I love Ronald Reagan. Yeah. And when I was growing up in Russia, we loved the Russian people, actually, not the government, but the Russian people loved Ronald Reagan. Loved him.
So I highly recommend that movie. But in there, it shows how the Kremlin was studying Ronald Reagan his whole life, because they said, this is somebody who could make a difference in government. And we've got to figure out his personality and how to stop him. And with that in mind, I just wonder if they've been studying Joe Biden his whole career, Kamala Harris her whole career, and they realized once he got into office, okay, we can take advantage of America, we can make a move on Ukraine, and Joe Biden won't do a damn thing about it. And that's exactly what was happening.
They do, like I said, they do psychological profiles. My assessment is that they did study Joe Biden, but not his whole career, because they make an assessment of what kind of person can eventually be like the head of the country. And Biden is just not the type of personality that I think Russians would know the Russian character. But they did study him in the run up to the election when and the same with Kamala. The Russians actually assess Kamala as incompetent, easily manipulatable, and I forgot the thing. There were three things that it might come to me later, and something like easily. And Biden is easily unbalanced, because like when people like Biden and Kamala, or even some of the Republicans like Lindsey Graham, when they go off like calling Putin, a killer, or like he can't remain in power, like use derogatory names, Putin's perception is that he got to them, he got under their skin, right? Trump never ever does it, because he doesn't want to give Putin the thought that he can unbalance him. So
okay, interesting. Well, this has been a good discussion. I'm hoping RFK Jr., Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, I hope they get through. If not, then we all need to be on the phone calling people, letting them know we're going to recall you. We're going to primary you, put Trump's cabinet in place, and let's make this country better. Rebekah, if people want to follow you online, where's the best place I can send them?
I am on all social media, including X, Truth Social, Getter, YouTube, Rumble, and I'm running a podcast series now called Trump's Playbook. And as you already said, I wrote the book, Putin's Playbook. It's available on Amazon. So yeah, drop me a line, and yeah, it's been a fun conversation. You enlightened me in several areas as well. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate you coming on. I'll put those direct links down below so people can find you easily. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
And you too. Thank you, Steve.